The topic we are going to see is PHP error handling and validation. This is under module 4. When we start discussing our problem, that one thing surfaced very quickly. What is validation and what is exception handling? For example, if we use a registration form, the user wants to enter a password. It contains some rules like it is a mixing of numbers and letters. If he is giving only letters in the sense, is that a validation issue or an exception issue? We need to think that, so that what will happen, if it's so, then should the UI validate that, and it just thrown those problems to the backend, and catches will happen based on that. Then when we coming to the conclusion about these two things, validation and exception. Validation is having some rules defined by system, and it may be verified against user what he is giving. Yeah, for example, if in an operating system, all the letters what we are typing, it will be taken it as a plain text. So to compose those numbers and letters is a rule, and exposed to from them by the validation process. And when we're talking about this exception, if for example, this is actually will work, this exception handling will work in an unpredicted way, and it should be in a wrong format also. So for example, if the user has an issue with the exception handling, when it will happen, for before topic we have discussed about this validation. If the user already exists in the system, then it may be an exception case, so that the UI will handle exceptions and pass it to the backend, and the UI catches, and the user can see the nice message based on that. So when creating scripts and web application, error handling is an important part. When you want to script, or when you want to code any web-based application, error handling is an important one. And if your code lacks error checking code, your program may look very unprofessional, and you may be open to some security risk too. So what are the handling methods? We have some different handling methods to overcome those things. Simple die statements and custom errors, and error triggers and error reporting. So these are the different methods we are going to see. So the basic error handling is die function, and this script explains how to open a text file. So within the delimiters of your PHP file, you can open the file using before whatever the variable you are using, you can use dollar before your variable. You can open your file, and inside you can give the parameter called my test. You can give file name dot test. Okay, and you just before reading you have to open the file. So that I'm using f open, and afterwards you can give or is nothing but to read your file at the beginning stage of your opening stage. If the file does not exist, you might get an error like this. The below the red statement is warning that f open of my test file dot text, and this function failed to open stream. No such file directory, or no such file or directory in C folder. So this is the warning message you may get if the file doesn't open. To prevent the user from getting an error message like the one above, we test whether the file exists before we try to access it. By using this if condition, you can check whether the file exists or not. So you can open the file, or you can using die. This is an error handling. Using this die method, you can see the error message for the file does not exist. It may have one thing, you can see the file, otherwise you can get an error message like this. Now, if the file does not exist, you get an error like this. The file does not exist. The code above is more efficient than the earlier one because it uses a simple handling mechanism to stop the script after the error. See that this is the thing which is not all cases. We should not script those scripts in all times. This is not the right way to neglect those scripts. However, simply stopping the script is not always the right way to go. Now let's take a look at alternative PHP functions for handling errors and creating custom error handling. It is quite simple, and we can create a special function called when an error occurs in PHP. So this function must be able to handle a minimum of two parameters. One is error level, another one is error message, but can accept up to 5 parameters. And the first two parameters what we have discussed is mandatory, that is error level and error message. But optional one is we can say file, line number, and the error context. Whatever, if you are getting any errors, the parameters we can face is like file name, line number, and error context. These are the parameters we can handle in the error stage. And this is the syntax we can follow, that error function of error level and error message. The first two parameters is mandatory, and the remaining file, error line, and error context. So these three, the last three parameters are optional one. So next we'll see the parameter and what is the description for that particular parameter. So the first two parameters, level and message, is mandatory, I told. So level, what is error level? So this is a mandatory one, and it specifies the level for the user defined error. So this must be a value number. And what about the message? So this is also a error message for the user defined. And file, so this is an optional. It specifies the file name in which error got occurred. And line, this is it specifies the line number in which your error is getting occurred. For example, if you are using a code, and if you are using a PHP code, and you just want to go to URL, I mean in localhost, you can see you can get a proper output. If it's so, if it doesn't have, then you can see the which line number you will getting an error message, all those things. And error context, it is also an optional, and it specifies an error containing every variable values in use when the error occurs. So this is also an error context message. And these are the error reporting levels in different types. Like we can see the constant reporting level, and for that I have given a value, and based on this we will see the descriptions each and every one. E error. So this is a fatal runtime error. An execution of the script is stopped. E warning. A fatal runtime error. An execution is not getting stopped. If the execution is script is not stopped, then warning message will come, and the execution is stopped, then error will come. And notice, the script found something that might be an error, but could also happen when running a script normally. So notice when it will happen, while running our code itself, you may get a notice. Otherwise, it also have it that might be an error. So before that we can get, otherwise normally when your code is running stage itself, we can get a notice like that. And user error, a fatal user generated error. This is like an E error, except it is generated by the PHP script using the function trigger error. You can trigger your errors by using this constant. So exception handling. So we already discussed about the validation and exception handling. Is it so? What is validation and what is exception handling? Again, we are going to see. And if you are going to fill in a registration form, you need a password that is it is a mixing of numbers and letters. And this is a real example of the validation. Before going to this exception, we need to know the validation. If the user types only letters, means then there is a is this a validation issue, or we need to exception issue. So that should the UI validate that and just pass it to the backend, and catches will happen. It catches the errors which what is the issue and all. So when we're talking about this exception, if the user already exists in a system, in that case there should be an exception. There should be an exception. So that time what will happen? UI validate the UI will take the error and will just thrown and then user can see a nice message. So PHP 5 has an exception model similar to that of other programming languages. So exceptions are important and provides a better control over error handling. So let's see the new keyword related to those exceptions. You can try. We have try option and throw and catch. When a user already exists in a system, and again he is trying to give some other value in the system. I mean, normally operating system will take only a plain text of your of the users users performance. When we